Have you ever asked yourself why the windows on every passenger plane today are oval and never square? And what does this tiny design detail have to do with Boeing becoming the undisputed empire of aviation, making millions off a fatal mistake made by someone else? In this video, we'll reveal the secret. We'll tell you how submerging an entire real-life passenger plane into a giant water tank was the only way to catch a silent, invisible killer hiding in plain sight, a phenomenon known as metal fatigue. But before they made this chilling discovery, we have to travel back in time to see how, suddenly and without warning, passenger planes began tearing apart in mid-air, raining down into the Mediterranean Sea for no logical reason. These terrifying and mysterious crashes forced British Prime Minister Winston Churchill to personally intervene, handing investigators a blank check just to solve the puzzle. We'll see how a single aircraft, once considered a post-war miracle that flew at 40,000 feet and left every competitor in the dust, turned into the worst nightmare in civil aviation history. And all of this, believe it or not, traces back to World War II fighter planes and a debt-ridden Britain that decided to challenge the world and leap into the jet age. They got there first, but they paid the ultimate price. Grab your coffee and let's dive in. Picture this. It's the summer of 1949. A commercial aircraft lifts off from Hatfield, England and flies on pure jet power for the very first time. No noisy propellers, just four sleek turbojet engines buried cleanly inside swept-back wings. Britain had just beaten every other nation to the jet age, and the world was forced to take notice. The aircraft was the de Havilland Comet. It wasn't just a new plane, it was a massive flex by the British industry. The country was still rebuilding from the rubble of World War II and drowning in debt, yet its engineers had delivered something completely unprecedented. By the time it entered service in 1952, passengers were sipping champagne in a vibration-free cabin at 40,000 feet, flying at 460 miles per hour, while competing airlines were stuck using clunky piston engine aircraft at half that altitude. The Comet was a genuine marvel. Orders were pouring in. Britain owned the skies. But within 2 years of its glorious debut, the Comet started killing people in ways nobody could explain. The nightmare began to unfold in 1953 when a BOAC flight broke apart just 6 minutes after taking off from Calcutta, killing all 43 people on board. Investigators initially blamed a severe storm or pilot error. Modifications were made and the fleet kept flying. Then came January 10th, 1954. A Comet departed Rome heading for London. 20 minutes into the flight, as it approached 27,000 feet, the pilot's radio transmission stopped mid-sentence. Witnesses below on the island of Elba looked up in horror to see the aircraft descending in flames into the sea. 29 passengers and 6 crew members were dead. The fleet was grounded, but with immense financial and political pressure mounting, the planes were rushed back into service just months later. It was a fatal mistake. Just 15 days after the planes returned to the sky, another Comet departed Rome. 40 minutes into the flight, climbing through 35,000 feet, the aircraft violently disintegrated over the Mediterranean near Naples. Everyone on board perished. The wreckage sank 3,300 feet into the dark depths of the sea. This time, the grounding was permanent. Production was completely halted. Prime Minister Winston Churchill stepped in, directing the Royal Navy to recover the wreckage and instructing investigators that the cost of solving this mystery must be reckoned neither in money nor in manpower. Lead investigator Sir Arnold Hall and his team took a radical approach. They took a brand new, complete Comet fuselage, built a massive custom water tank around it, and completely submerged it. They used water instead of air, so that if the plane exploded under pressure, it wouldn't blow up the entire facility. For months, they subjected the submerged plane to simulated continuous flights, pressurizing and depressurizing the cabin over and over again. Finally, on June 24, 1954, after exactly 3,057 cycles, the plane burst open. The water tank test revealed a terrifying truth. The Comet hadn't been brought down by bombs, bad weather, or pilot error. It was brought down by the very physics of flight. When a plane climbs to cruising altitude, the pressurized cabin expands slightly like a balloon. When it descends, it contracts. What the engineers hadn't fully realized was that every single cycle placed immense, invisible stress on the thin aluminum skin of the fuselage. Engineers call this metal fatigue. It doesn't give you a warning. It doesn't trigger an alarm in the cockpit. It silently accumulates microscopic crack by microscopic crack until the metal simply rips apart. A popular myth says the planes crashed because their passenger windows were square, but the truth is more technical. The fatal cracks didn't start at the passenger windows. They originated from tiny rivet and bolt holes near technical cutouts above the cockpit. De Havilland had used a manufacturing technique, punch riveting, that concentrated stress on these tiny points, and the metal skin simply wasn't thick enough to handle the immense pressure of high-altitude jet flight. While de Havilland was dealing with this catastrophic fallout, American companies like Boeing and Douglas were watching closely. De Havilland had built the Comet using a safe life philosophy, hoping the structure would simply last its intended lifespan, but Boeing took a different route. Fail-safe design. They engineered their planes so that if one piece of metal cracked, the load would instantly redistribute to surrounding parts, preventing the whole plane from tearing apart. De Havilland eventually fixed the Comet. They released the Comet 4 with a reinforced fuselage, thicker skin, and properly oval windows to distribute stress evenly. It was a perfectly safe plane, and it even flew the first transatlantic jet service. But the damage was done. Just 3 weeks later, Boeing launched the 707. It carried more passengers, flew further, and was cheaper to run. And most importantly, it didn't carry the cursed reputation of the Comet. Airlines cancelled their British orders and flocked to the Americans. Today, the company that built the world's first commercial jetliner doesn't even exist. De Havilland was swallowed up by other companies and faded into history. But their sacrifice changed the world. Every time you board a commercial flight today, you are protected by the blood and the billions lost on the Comet. The oval windows you look out of, the rigorous pressurization tests every new plane must undergo, and the fail-safe engineering that keeps you alive in the sky, all of it exists because of the Comet disasters. Britain got there first. They pushed technology beyond its limits, but in the end they learned the lesson and Boeing walked away with the empire.